Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 626. 626. December the 5th, 2018, Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, just to follow up on this interview that Mark Meadows did with, what's his name? On Fox. The old guy. Lou Dobbs. Yeah. Lou Dobbs. So Mark Meadows was on Lou Dobbs, and he tells Lou Dobbs, he says, yeah, you want to know this this whistleblower, Mr. Kane, Dennis Kane, he actually had contacted John Huber 8 months ago. 8 months ago. And never heard a word back from Huber until this past Friday at 2 o'clock p.m. Funny how after Meadows' committee calls for Huber to come and testify, all of a sudden we see a little movement on this type of thing and the raid on Mr. Kane, or of course Mr. Kane going to the IG. So it appears that Mr. Kane had gone to Huber 8 months ago and didn't hear a word, which is why he probably went to the IG, who was supposed to be working with Huber. And then he gets raided. More on that later. But it appears now that it wasn't just this whistleblower, Mr. Kane, that attempted to make contact with Huber. It appears there were 2 other whistleblowers that attempted to contact Mr. Huber. Doesn't sound like he's very interested. Here he has 3 whistleblowers, and we know Victoria Tensing says her client, Mr. Campbell, who was the FBI inside informant during the whole time, has all the goods. He was never contacted by Mr. Huber. Be very interesting. Mr. Huber, of course, he was supposed to testify tomorrow, or that would be today, Wednesday, but that got postponed because of the Bush funeral. So I assume in the next couple days, maybe next week, Huber will show up. But if he can put it off for another 10 days, it's over. Because after that, it'll be the Christmas break, and after that, the Democrats take over. At which point, they won't be interested in hearing from Mr. Huber. You see how that works? Roger Stone has advised the Senate Intelligence Committee to stuff it, that he will not cooperate with their committee. If he is forced by subpoena to come and testify, he will plead the Fifth. He's not going to comply with turning over any documents. So according to Stone's lawyer, he testified in front of the House Intelligence Committee. He provided all the documents that they asked for. And he's been through the ringer with Mueller, and he's had enough. He's done. He's not participating in this exercise anymore. And he's basically been named as one of the individuals that the Senate Intelligence Committee is one of the people they want to talk to. And apparently, Senator Turn In Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein, someone on her staff, has sent a letter to Stone's attorney letting him know that they may be requesting an interview with Stone in the new Congress. And apparently Stone has just told his attorney, will you tell him no thanks, I'm not coming in, or if they subpoena me, I just will plead the Fifth. I'm not cooperating at all. Tell him to stuff it. And that's exactly what his attorney did. Well done, Roger Stone. It's about time that someone stood up to Uncle Bob the Executioner. And by the way, Jerome Corsi, I've gained a whole new respect for him. I wish more people would have stood up to Uncle Bob the Executioner. And from the very beginning, this thing only got out of hand from the very beginning because at the very beginning, they gave Uncle Bob credibility. And now they're paying a heavy price for it. They should have stated from the very get-go what he was all about and what the so-called investigation was all about. It was all a hoax and a witch hunt, just as Trump said. That's where the mistake was made, and we're paying a heavy, heavy price for it. So we're now learning that the raid on this Chicago businessman that also occurred on the same day. Remember, there were 4 raids that day. 4 raids on the 29th. Not just Mr. Kane. There was also the raid on this Chicago businessman who is named Ed Burke, who we know is a political hack, a Democrat political hack and lawyer who is very involved in working with Democrats on getting judges elected to state and federal courts. Now, it turns out that this Chicago businessman, Mr. Burke, did tax work for Trump for about 10 years. And then, apparently, they had some sort of a falling out, some sort of a disagreement. And approximately about a year or two ago, it's in the recent past, and they no longer have the relationship, the business relationship. But apparently, he did Trump's taxes for 10 years, or was one of the, I'm sure Trump has multiple tax attorneys, but he was certainly one of the people who did work for Trump for about a period of 10 years. And supposedly, he did a pretty good job of lowering Trump's quarterly taxes on his business taxes. So it is now being suspected that Mueller's thugs were behind the raid on Mr. Burke. And as I'll get into here in a little while, it appears now that Mueller may have been behind the raid on Mr. Kane as well. And it's now being suspected that Uncle Bob the Executioner learned about or got information about Mr. Burke from Michael Cohen as part of his plea deal. So it looks like Cohen may have tipped off Uncle Bob the Executioner onto Ed Burke as part of his plea deal. It's being suspected, and I would say that would certainly be logical to assume at this point. Well, as most of you know by now, France has suspended this fuel tax. Now, it's funny because Macron did not come out himself and announce it. He passed that off to his prime minister. Edouard Philippe is the one who made the announcement. But if you read the statement that he made, as I did, I read the statement. He doesn't say that they're going to all out repeal or reverse their decision on this fuel tax. He's saying that they're going to suspend it for several months. What does that mean to me? Well, that means to me that they realize that their situation's out of control. They don't really have a way to handle it right now. So they'll come back at it in a few months once they've made other preparations for how to deal with the riot that will ensue afterwards. Again, my guess is they're getting with the military right now, coming up with a plan to put the military on the streets to put down the riots that will break out when they reintroduce it in a few months, which I believe they probably will. It's going to be kind of tricky because there are parliamentary elections coming up in May of 2019 in France. And right now, the party of Marine Le Pen, which I believe has actually changed and modified itself, but still pretty much the party of Marine Le Pen, is right now leading in the polls, showing that they will have the most success in those May parliamentary elections. So my guess is that I would be surprised if they would come back and do this before those elections, but they very well could. We'll just have to see. It wouldn't be politically very wise, but we'll just have to watch and see what happens on that. But this deal by no means is gone. The globalists are not going to give up. That's not how they look at it. They go, oh, well, we've been defeated. I guess we'll have to roll it back. I don't think so. That's not how I haven't seen any evidence from that from the EU at all. Everyone I've seen push back on the EU, whether it's Greece or Spain or Poland or anyone else, I mean, the EU doesn't really take no for an answer. They just sit back, scratch their head, and say, okay, so what other tactic can we use to accomplish? They never really stop trying to accomplish their goal. They just had to find another way to do it. So we'll see where all this leads. But again, this issue, as many people have stated in the comments section, it was the fuel tax which really sparked the protests, which turned into riots. But the underlying issues, the kindling, I guess you could say, is already there because it's much more than just these fuel taxes. It's the overall economic situation in France, and that fact that anti-globalism is now taking root in France. And they were the last ones to figure it out. Just about everyone else in Europe has already figured it out. It's going to be a very, very chaotic and I think, year in 2019 in Europe. I think we're going to see a lot of this type of stuff that's going on in France. And I think that we're going to see them reintroduce this fuel tax at some point, probably after the parliamentary elections, but could happen before that. But we'll continue to watch, because I can assure you the globalist elitist in Europe and the Eurozone are not going to back away. I've never seen them do it at this point. They'll just think of a more devious tactic that they can use. We'll keep watching. Well, since Michael Cohen was indicted for lying to Congress, Chuck Grassley has sent a letter to Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal reminding him that Glenn Simpson lied to Congress. And he's suggesting, are you going to refer him for criminal prosecution? Lots of people came and lied to Congress, Mr. Grassley. How about Sally Yates? How about Clapper? How about Brennan? How about Comey? How about the whole group? The Rotten Reverend? They all came and lied to Congress, Mr. Grassley. Wake up. You're playing tiddlywinks. This is some good news for us. Anti-Trump fake news site The Weekly Standard, run by anti-Trump neocon Bill Kristol, is going under. They likely are not going to survive into 2019. Employees have been told and urged to start looking because of dwindling readership and circulation, and they currently have no budget forecast for 2019. Keep in mind, they are a kind of a partly owned by the same group that owns the Washington Examiner, where you have a couple of, the Washington Examiner's got some pretty good people. Byron York is at the Washington Examiner. Some pretty good people there. It's kind of a mix. There's no hardcore anti-Trumpers there, and there's no real hardcore pro-Trumpers there. They're fairly middle of the road. They lean, one way or another, but nothing too hardcore going on at the Washington Examiner. The only person I really read there is Byron York anyway. But some of these people could end up, from the Weekly Standard, thought that they end up at the Washington Examiner, but one of their editors was interviewed, and he said, it ain't happening. It ain't happening. We're all going to be gone, basically. The Weekly Standard's folding up, closing up shop, and we're all going to be gone, and I don't think they're going to have us over to Washington Examiner. So that's how that's looking there. Very well done. Good to get rid of Bill Kristol, although I hear he's going to run for president or challenge Trump in 2020. That should be a joke. Is what that will be. That will be a joke. Okay. Charles Grassley, again, has written a letter to No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray, the director of the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her. And Grassley is asking Wray for some answers about the raid on Dennis Kane, the whistleblower. Grassley wants to know the following. He wants to know, does the FBI consider Mr. Kane's disclosures as a whistleblower to be protected? He's asking, in other words, do you respect the rights of a whistleblower? Because he had been given whistleblower status. So Grassley wants to know if Christopher Wray and the FBI believe that the disclosures by Mr. Kane and whistleblowers like him should be protected. He wants to know, was the FBI aware that Mr. Kane made lawful disclosures to the IG? And if so, was the FBI aware that these disclosures were passed to the House and Senate Intel committees? I surely hope so. They're the freaking FBI. How would they not know? What was the basis of the raid? Please supply a copy of the warrant and other pertinent documents. Generally, you would learn a lot about these things pretty quickly because reporters would be on down the courthouse looking at the records. But in this particular case, with Mr. Kane, as in with a lot of these things that are tied to Uncle Bob the Executioner, which is why I think this is an Uncle Bob situation now. The documents in this case are sealed. Here's a name. Bill Priestap. Yes, we've talked a lot about him. He's that mysterious guy that was constantly being mentioned in the Strzok and Page emails, constantly showing up in places, constantly being around everything, but like a ghost. He never actually has his hand in it. Of course, he was the head of counterintelligence. So Bill Priestap is retiring this year with full benefits. How about that? And his spokesman says it's not connected to anything with the investigations. It's just that he has his 20 years in and will be retiring. Keep in mind, it was Bill Priestap who was the boss of Peter's Been Stroking Us. Keep in mind, Priestap was in London during the days in which Papagalopoulos was being dirtied up by the fat man, Stephen Halper. It was Priestap who changed the wording from president to senior government official in Comey's speech in an effort to hide Obama's role and his knowledge of the frame-up. Priestap is also, by a lot of people, believed that he is the insider who has been providing information to investigators about the Obama crime syndicate. I would not be one of those people who believe that. I think he's part of the plot. If, in fact, he was a inside information giving sort of guy, hell, he was the head of counterintelligence. He knew everything everybody was doing, including Comey, including Strzok and Page, including McCabe, the whole 9 yards. If he was this great inside informant, then why aren't all these people in prison? Informant my ass. Well, we're starting to understand a lot more about what happened in California and how we managed to lose 6 and most likely 7 Republican seats, many of them in the area around Orange County, and we're now learning exactly what happened. It appears that in the state of California, they passed a law in regards to something called ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is where Democratic activists went door to door to collect ballots, including a lot of absentee ballots. Ballots people had requested but did not turn in on election night. So they sent these people out to harvest the ballots. And in doing so, flipped 6 seats, maybe 7. 5 of which the Republican was up sometimes as much as by 7, 8, 9% on the night of the election. But after harvesting those ballots, boom, 6 pretty soon, I'm sure, 7 seats lost, including Dana Rohrabacher. If you look at which I looked at the chart, they have a chart which actually shows you what the voter turnout was in all these districts within Orange County and some surrounding counties that are generally lean Republican or vote Republican. When you look at and remember, the Republicans had a very high turnout for a midterm election. The average turnout for Republicans in Orange County was 76% in a midterm election. That's unprecedented. Yet they still lost? Well, when you look at the numbers of the turnout for Democrats, not just in Orange County, but all over California, it was up in the 80s, high 70s and 80s. 77, 78, 81, 83, 86% turnout in a midterm election. In a presidential year, we generally only see about 53, 54%. We even had one county in Orange County that achieved a 120% turnout. That's pretty good, don't you think? How do you get 120% return? That's great. That's great. 120%. That means 20% more. You had 20% more people show up to turn in their ballot or vote than actually are even registered. That's pretty good, don't you think? Sounds like a winning strategy for 2020. So California has made this legal. Boy, that's a case study if ever there was one. You know, Democrats have to be looking at that and going, wow, we need to do this in every blue state. Every state where we control the legislatures and the governorship, we need to do this in every state. Every blue state. You can assume that in 2020, every blue state will do ballot harvesting. And it was also done, by the way, there's a suit going on, a legal suit going on right now, where it appears that the Republican Party in North Carolina did this in a primary, to try to primary a pro-Trump Republican who was trying to take the seat from an establishment anti-Trump Republican. And it's not legal in North Carolina. That's why the case is in court. The Republicans, the Republican National Committee and the GOP better be paying very close attention to this. Oh, well, the creepy porn lawyer Avenatti says that he won't be running in 2020. Did anybody actually take him seriously that he would? And by the way, Trump's attorney, the judge ruled, of course, that in that case that the creepy porn lawyer was representing Saggy Daniels. They lost the case and they have to pay Trump's legal fees. But Trump's attorney has now gone back to court and says, hey, we don't just want legal fees. There needs to be a penalty for bringing this type of a case. Remember, we had a deal, and she broke the deal and tried to use it as a political weapon. There needs to be a punishment involved here. So Trump's attorneys are asking for double that amount. They're looking for the amount of legal fees plus to double that amount is a punitive measure against Saggy and Avenatti, which would likely bankrupt both of them. It would be, geez, $800,000 or something, close to 800 grand. Don't know where Avenatti or Saggy are going to get 800 grand. Pretty sure they don't have it. Then we have Donna Brazile, who's out there on the stump, talking about the Democrats for 2020. She says she expects that there'll be about 30 people running to be the Democratic nominee to run against Trump. And she was asked about the Right Reverend Clinton, and she says that she does not believe that the Right Reverend Clinton will run in 2020. Well, I don't believe she'll win the primary in 2020. Now, she may figure out between now and then how irrelevant she is, but right now, in her mind, she has every intention. Now, this may be part of the plot for a draft Hillary campaign, because that's the only way that the Right Reverend Clinton can pull this off. She has to lay back in the weeds, let all the other Democrats go out and beat themselves to death, beat each other up, while she stays back in the shadows, and then after they've beaten everybody, after everybody's beaten everybody else up, and they all realize that none of them really have the ability to raise the type of money she can raise. She's already raised the money. She's been doing it for 2 years, and she'll continue through her organizations. Then she will want to have an artificial fake draft Hillary campaign, where a bunch of people say, okay, well, we had 30 Democrats, now we're down to 7 or 8. None of them can really raise that kind of money. None of them have national appeal. None of them have the background, hey, it looks like the Right Reverend Clinton may be our best shot. In which case, she'll organize a fake draft Hillary campaign so she can step up to the mic and say, well, I really didn't want to run. I said I would never run, but I guess I have no choice because everyone tells me that I'm the best chance of beating Trump in 2020 and I'm the best person for the job. I've got the experience, blah, 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 blah. And that will be her draft Hillary. That's what she's going to try to do. I don't think she'll be successful, but I do believe that's what she believes that she's going to do. We have Pelosi promising to pass the illegal amnesty bill, otherwise known as the DREAM Act, promising to get that done. Well, it'll never make it through the Senate. They certainly might get it through the House for political reasons, the same way that the Republicans got a repeal of Obamacare 8 or 9 or 10 times until it actually counted. And then when it actually counted, they couldn't seem to get the votes. Same is true here. Pelosi will have no problem letting the left-wing crazies in the House pass all kinds of crazy left-wing bills to keep the base energized, to keep the donations coming in, and to keep those people having hope. She knows good and well none of it will ever get it may get out of the House, but it'll get killed in the Senate, and Trump would never sign it. And the Democrats are stating that their very first bill is going to be a bill that they're going to pass that would force the president, in this case Trump, to release his tax returns. I seriously doubt that will actually be passed in the Senate, even if it makes it out of the House. Hey, how about our boy Sean Hannity? He's a big, big fan. In fact, his favorite band is Florida Georgia Line. I believe he plays their music on his radio show all the time. I believe it's his theme song. Well, it appears that the lead singer of that band, Tyler Hubbard, is now all in for more gun control. And he's trying to gather a bunch of other country music stars to join him. Do you think Hannity is going to change his bumper music? You think he's going to continue to play their music and be a fan? We'll wait and see. Sadly, I'm very sad to have to report this to you. Nigel Farage has resigned from UKIP, the very party that he founded. The United Kingdom Independence Party, founded by Nigel Farage. He stepped away from it, very unhappy with the direction it is going, with the current leader of that party, Gerard Batten. And I think he has some issues with Tommy Robinson as well, who's now hitched his wagon to the movement. Farage thinks they've become way too, I don't know what the term is, but they seem to really go full bore and focus almost completely on the migration issue, which they're sounding very Islam or whatever, which is not really a direction that Nigel Farage wanted that thing to go. He understands the migrant situation. He wants to protect the borders, but he didn't want it to turn into a one-issue party. He was more about the economics and the civil liberties and the freedoms and all that kind of stuff. Is really the taxes and the business, and because Farage is a businessman. He started the party kind of as a businessman's party. More populist businessman's party, focusing on like economic issues, trade issues, and things and such. Obviously, the social issues come into every party platform, and he's pretty common sense on those. But I think he believes that party has gone way too much into the social stuff and just doesn't like where it's going. So it appears that Farage announced this morning on, I guess he's got his own radio show, announced this morning that he has resigned from UKIP. It's very sad because I had hoped to see him step up and go back into more of a leadership role, because I believe that in the coming year, Europe is really going to explode. It's been building and building and building. The elections last year, a couple major elections, I think a lot of people got worked up, got involved in the elections, a lot of enthusiasm and energy put into it. Then the elections ended. You're obviously going to have that dip in enthusiasm, but I believe that people now had about a year off there, and of course the EU continues to be more and more tyrannical. We're seeing now the roots of this populist movement really hitting in France. I think that in the year 2019, we are seeing a lot of pushback. We are seeing a lot of populist leaders in Europe standing up to the EU. I do believe that the migrant crisis is going to come to a head. I think a lot of things are going to come to a head in Europe in 2019, and I expect it's going to be a very tumultuous year in Europe. I think there are going to be a lot of riots. There's going to be a lot of problems in Europe, and a lot of challenges to the EU. A lot of more populist uprisings, a lot more challenging of the ruling elite in Europe and the globalist ruling elite. I think that that's on the menu for Europe in 2019, and I was hoping that Farage would be there to reclaim the mantle of his party and rejuvenate that situation. But it looks like now that's not going to happen. And listening to him this morning, his take on this Brexit deal, it doesn't sound like Farage has very much confidence that that's going to go well. It sounds like Farage believes that Theresa May is going to use whatever tactics are necessary, blackmail, threats, whatever it takes to get the votes she needs to get her deal ratified. And Farage believes that that's it. You know, that Brexit, there's not going to be a Brexit. They voted for a Brexit, but there's not really going to be a Brexit, and that it's been a failed attempt. And I don't. He sounds like he doesn't have any particular answers for where it goes after that. He seems to think, well, that's it. I mean, that's it. Done. So it does not look good, and I feel bad for the folks in the UK. I remember that whole experience of Brexit leading up to the vote and all the crazy things that happened and how much energy was put into it. And so many here on the other side of the pond, here in the United States, were following that very closely. We were emotionally wrapped up in Brexit as well. And I was. And we were pulling so hard for it. And it was looking like it was probably not going to happen up until just a couple of weeks before the vote. Then we saw the polls move. And then on the day of Brexit to win, it was just a wonderful day. I remember it very well, and we were all so happy, and it looked like we saw this incredible thing that happened, and we thought this would be the launch of freedom to begin re-emerging in Europe, beginning with the UK. And now here we sit watching what that has all turned into, and it doesn't give a lot of us hope, and I feel very, very bad about that. Because if people cannot achieve freedom by peaceful legal means, it's just a matter of time before they exercise their last and only option, and that usually is not good. The tree of liberty must be watered from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. That's what history has shown us for a very, very long time. Wish we could learn from history, but we always end up repeating it. I believe now that it is possible and very likely that it was Uncle Bob the Executioner who was likely behind the raid on Mr. Kane, Dennis Kane, the whistleblower, because the information that he gave was damaging to, specifically, Mueller, showing that Mueller did not investigate obvious crimes. And now we're hearing these rumors that Uncle Bob wanted to see that stuff. He wanted to have the documents in his hand. And apparently, Horowitz either did not tell Uncle Bob or he did not share with Uncle Bob this information. He shared it with the House and Senate Intelligence Committee because he's obligated to by a rule that exists within the Inspector General's office, which is why he shared it. I suspected that someone in the Senate Intelligence Committee, likely Mr. Warner or Feinstein or someone, passed it on to Mueller. But if they did, then Mueller would have it. So now I'm thinking that the Senate Intelligence Committee, whoever that person or persons were, likely did not give Uncle Bob the actual documents that they received or copies, probably just briefed him or informed him. And that's probably what motivated him to say, I got to get my hands on these documents myself. That's where I'm kind of at today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a good night. See you. Bye.